welcome to the second season. Welcome to Here We Journey with Pastor Greg, Season 2. When I first started talking about a podcast, I wasn't sure I would reach it to this point. I wasn't sure if I would come back for a second season. So many podcasts, as you guys know, after one season or maybe a couple episodes, they kind of die out. So I found myself over my brief break really kind of missing doing this. So I'm excited to once again be recording another episode. I have a few personal updates to give you guys, and then this is going to be kind of a free flow, off the top of my head type episode as we ease back into this. I'm also going to talk a little bit about some of the changes you might feel or expect through this upcoming season. So first is, I mentioned in the final couple episodes of season 1 that I possibly might have a new congregation by the time I come back and start recording season 2. I am happy to announce and to say that I have been called to a new congregation, and I am recording this on August 21st. September 1st is my start date when I officially walk in as Pastor Hartman of New Spirit Lutheran Church, and I'm excited about that. I am looking forward to the great ministry we will be able to do together in the city of Tucson. I want to let you guys know that I may occasionally talk about some things going on in the congregation. Some things that happened or are happening. But for the most part, this podcast will remain Pastor Greg speaking as Pastor Greg, not as Pastor Hartman of New Spirit Lutheran Church. Now, I'm sure that there will be a number of people from the congregation that listen to this podcast. I am hopeful, and I want you to know that this will be one of my places where I speak maybe a little bit more candid about some things that I wouldn't necessarily in a sermon or an official setting at the congregation. So this is Pastor Greg. This will remain Pastor Greg. And I am called to a congregation. So there'll be kind of a mix, but I need to make sure we're clear that this remains Pastor Greg. These thoughts are not the thoughts or necessarily always the opinions of New Spirit Lutheran Church. These are my own thoughts. These are my own opinions. These are me speaking from a place of pastoral knowledge and experience and understanding, but it's still me. So I want to make sure that is put out and is very clear that this is what the podcast will be. The other thing that I want to touch on is I've been working on trying to kind of relaunch or at least refocus some of my social media presence. TikTok, my professional Pastor Greg public figure page on Facebook, some of those places where I am present as Pastor Greg. And this is going to be another one of those places where I kind of refocus and be a little bit more intentional about what I talk about, what I deal with, the things I address. I'll still talk about how we are all on a journey through life, through faith, through self-development, and you will get a sense, probably a little bit more, that I'm speaking as pastor. I've tried to be intentional about this being a place where, and a podcast that you don't have to be Christian, you don't have to be Lutheran to listen. And I hope that doesn't change. I want to acknowledge, though, that I am a pastor, an ordained, called by God pastor. I am always a pastor. My wife reminded me the other day that, yes, there is Greg, the husband, father, the man, the person, but that identity cannot be fully separated from the called and ordained pastor. So there might be a little bit more times where I talk specifically from my vantage point as a pastor and my understandings as a pastor. Know that if you are not a Christian, if you are not a Lutheran, if you have found this podcast rewarding and fulfilling and helpful on your journey, I hope that continues. I'm only putting this out there so that you are aware that it might feel a little bit different. I might reference things a little bit more. I hope you stay with me. What I found interesting was the final episode that I published for season 1, talking about Christian nationalism, is the one that has received the most listens, the most views on my YouTube channel. So it seems that people at least are curious about what I say as pastor, from when I speak from that point of view. I recognize, though, that I am not your stereotypical pastor. In some ways, I am. I'm a middle-aged white guy. That's somewhat stereotypical. And yet, in many ways, I am not, right? I wasn't someone that went from college straight to seminary. I wasn't someone that grew up knowing or feeling the call to ministry. I'm not what is often pushed as the monolith of Christianity, at least on a lot of media. I'm not a conservative, biblical literalist pastor. I am a progressive pastor. I am Lutheran. I'm not near as progressive as some people that I know and love and call colleagues, but I recognize that I am progressive. I'm also maybe a little bit more straightforward than some. I might be a little bit more outspoken in some aspects. Let's face another fact that a lot of Christians, at least in society, now I'm talking general terms, Christians are seen as conservative. In many ways, Christianity has been aligned both by those that claim to be Christian and by certain political groups to be very conservative and very restrictive. There's been a lot that has happened since my last podcast. A lot has happened. We have a lot to talk about. I'm just naming these things ahead of time for those that maybe have listened for a long time. I really want to just be intentional. I also want to be very frank with those that have just recently found the podcast, and maybe this is one of their first episodes to listen to. I'm naming some things so that you guys know what you're coming across, what you might learn to expect, what you might be confronted with. Because I do often try to be very direct about things. Sometimes that's a benefit. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes I need to be a little bit more direct about things. But I try not to mince words. There's a passage in the Bible, and I'm blanking on chapter and verse. But Jesus said, "Let your no be no and your yes be yes." Be direct. Mean what you say. Say what you mean. And I try to do that here. So we're going to talk about some stuff. And you don't have to agree with me. That's okay. If everyone agreed with me all the time, the world would be really boring. It'd be easier for me, but it'd be really boring. I want to get you to think. I want to challenge you to ponder and process things. I think that's ultimately one of my major life goals as pastor, as a person, as someone who creates content for the internet, is to get people to think. If they come to a conclusion different than mine, but they've gone through the process of thinking and they're not just simply saying, "Oh, I believe this because pastor said or my parents said," and there's times, right, in our development, our mental development, that is why we believe and think things. But then comes a point in our lives where we have to take ownership of the things that we think and believe and say. So if I can in some way serve as an instrument of, or a inspiration to think about things, again, even if you do come to a different conclusion, that's a job well done for me. I'm glad that happens. It's the times where we just mindlessly say, "Well, I believe this because so-and-so said so." I mean, we see the faults in that, right? Well, I saw it on Facebook. It must be true. So-and-so shared a picture or an article on Facebook. It must be true. If it's on the internet, it must be true. We know that's not the case. And I will own the fact that sometimes I have been known to fall into the same trap that everyone else, right? We have trusted people, we have trusted sources, and sometimes they post things. And without doing the work, without researching it and checking it out, we just share, or we just accept it as true. We got to get better about that. We got to get better at thinking for ourselves, thinking and processing and pondering things. But that's work. That's hard. That takes effort. And oftentimes at the end of the day, or on the weekend, that's the last thing we want to do. The last thing we want to do is sit and think and process and ponder, especially when we ponder questions that don't have many answers that can be verified, especially, faith, right? God. How can you believe in a God that's not provable scientifically? Now, I argue there's a lot of indirect evidence of God. But I get that question. And that's a question we often try to avoid, right? And we maybe even attack those that are willing or have the nerve to question our faith. We say, well, I just believe. No, it's a matter of faith that you believe, and it's something that you got to process and ponder and work through. Faith needs to continue to grow, and one of the ways faith grows is by us being willing to ask questions and to spend time in the uncomfortable place of questions. Again, we don't always want to do that, right? That's hard work. But part of our journey is confronting questions, confronting things, wrestling with things. We see throughout not just the Bible, but many faith traditions have stories of someone wrestling with the truth or wrestling with a deity or going on a journey to come to some sort of understanding. That's what we're all doing, or that's what we all should be doing. And sometimes we end up in different places, and that's okay. Those same questions might result in someone not believing. At least believing in the God that they were told that they should believe in. So I have no problems talking with someone that doesn't believe in God. I have no problems talking with friends that are atheists or outright say that God does not exist. Because part of me says, I get it. I can understand how you came to that understanding. I understand that you went through the process of reading, of studying, of questioning, and that's where your answers have led you right now. I also can say that as a pastor, I've been asked this before, I don't believe. I might lose some of you guys here. I don't believe that you have to believe to be saved. Let me say that again. I don't believe that you have to believe in God to be saved. I also don't believe you earn salvation. There's nothing we can do to earn or unearn salvation. That's some of that Lutheran theology coming through. I believe, and this is where I take it a little bit further, that ultimately, who is and is not saved, that's up to God. Now, personally, I like to think, and I believe, that throughout the existence of the world, looking at additional witnesses of the divine interacting with creation, and looking at the biblical overarching story, that God is a God of love, that God wants to be in right relationship with us, and that there's nothing that would stop God from that. And there's nothing that we can do to cause God not to love us. So I guess what I'm saying is I fall into the camp of, if there is some sort of hell or other place away from God, it's probably empty. Maybe I could see an argument for an experience of heaven, that is different depending on where your beliefs or non-beliefs led you. But I don't think it's going to be something that's punishment, or I don't think you're going to be poked in the eyes with pitchforks or burnt by fire for the rest of eternity. I don't think a God of love that we see in the overarching story of the biblical witness, as well as other religious teachings and belief systems, I don't believe that there's this place where people will spend eternity being hurt and being punished and being mutilated and all those things that we associate with hell or damnation. Could I be wrong? Yes, I could be wrong. I don't think I am. I don't believe I am. Having studied Scripture and studied in Greek and read commentaries and read historical context of what Jesus and other writers are talking about when they talk about what we associate as hell, I'm pretty confident in saying this. You may agree with me, you may not. That's okay. I pause because there's some heavy stuff that Christians are and have done lately that I don't think are in line with the biblical witness. And I'm hearing my friends that are not Christians saying, you know, Pastor, you are different. And there's still too many that are not different for us to feel safe and welcomed in the church. And I'm not just talking LGBTQIA 2-spirit plus individuals. I'm talking about people that have been hurt by the church. I'm talking about anyone that has had a negative relationship with the church. There's hurt there. There's fear. There's anger. Rightly so. So pastors like me, Christians like me, need to start speaking and speaking more. Speaking out more, being a little bit louder. I see this podcast as serving as part of that process as well. I see us working together to say Christian nationalism is not okay. Not following the words of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, and acting actually directly opposite of that. That's not what it means to be a Christian. Yeah, that's not what it means to be a Christian. So many of these other pastors, faith leaders, it sickens me to hear some of the things they say. Now, I am going to be even more intentional this coming season to address some things. And I'm going to try really hard not to attack the person saying it, but instead address the idea, the thoughts behind it, and why I think it's an issue. I'm also human. I might fail at that from time to time. But it's time. It's time for me and you and anyone else who is happening to hear this. It's time for us to raise our collective voices and be the light in this world. And again, if you don't believe, if you're not Christian, if you wouldn't identify as a Christian, I do believe that there are life lessons or approaches or a lot of things that we can agree on and even work together to make this world a better place. To make this world a world where people feel more love and acceptance. A place where the evils, whatever you want to say, where they come from, that they don't take over. That they aren't the controlling force. That we no longer live in a place of fear, where we no longer live in a place of judgment, where we no longer live in a place where so much is wrong. The world is broken. I live in America. America is broken in so many ways. So yes, that's the other thing you need to be aware of. If you didn't listen to all of season 1, no, I talk politics. I address things that are happening at all levels. Things like a certain Congress person saying we should be proud to call ourselves Christian nationalists. That's not okay. In fact, it's kind of scary that someone in the halls of Congress has these opinions and these thoughts and is even pushing for them to become more commonplace. Go as far as selling t-shirts that say proud Christian nationalist. There's pastors that are talking about having a arsenal of AK assault rifle styled weapons. And that they're buying more. And then in their sermons making sounds of guns being cocked and loaded. That's not okay. Especially in light of events like Uvalde. So, I guess this diatribe of a first episode of season 2 is to let you know we're going to get into some things. We're going to address and confront some things. And it's okay if you don't agree with me. If you don't arrive at the same conclusion that I have arrived at. That's okay. That's okay. I hope you continue to listen and come with me through this journey. I thank you for supporting me. I thank you for listening to this episode. I thank you for joining me through last season. If you haven't and you're interested, I do have a YouTube channel, Pastor Greg Hartman, where I post videos of the podcast as well as other videos, and I'll be making more content there. I have a Facebook page, Pastor Greg Hartman, where I post my pastoral musings sometimes. And then I also have some things like Pastor Greg Creations, where I post some of my artwork and some of the creations I've been doing during this short time away. I've been working on things like learning how to use sublimation printing to make t-shirts and cups and things of that nature. So I've been expressing my artistic expressions. So Pastor Greg Creations on Facebook, there's a page where you can find some of that stuff. So we'll still talk about those things, but we're going to get into some heavier weight topics than maybe we did last season. So be well. Know that you make this world a better place simply by being in it, simply by being who you are. You are loved, you are valued, you are seen. Until next week, be well.